I was really, really nervous. It was very challenging. I think I was, again, very naive.
This is The Payoff with me, Sylvia Jeffries, thanks to Belong Internet. Kellie Hush, it's great to see you and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's lovely to see you. I've missed you.
I know, it's been a while. So we first met when you were working on Harper's BAZAAR, when you were the editor there, deep in fashion land. And I've watched you move through various stages of your career since then as well. And we'll speak to all of that, but I'd love to go back to the start for you and what your first job was in the fashion biz and what drew you into the fashion world.
I started off as a journalist wanting to be the next yarn event, which was probably not on the cards for me.
You and me and everybody else.
Exactly, every other journalist in Australia. And I always say, you know, at the time I thought it was terrible, but I looked about 12 when I was 21. So that was always, it's great now that I'm, you know, in midlife, but I was too young to ever be really taken seriously, which was not great. But so I didn't think I could combine journalism with my passion, which was fashion. So I started off at Who Weekly magazine, and it became really clear back then to my editors that I loved fashion. And we used to have these special issues within Who Weekly, and a lot of them had these massive kind of fashion sections. So that was kind of my first job in fashion at a certain extent. You know, I worked in retail when I was at uni. I worked at Country Road and Esprit and did all of that as well. But my first true working job in fashion was being, you know, editor of some of those fashion pages in Who Weekly. And then from there, they, at Time Inc. at the time, they moved me onto the launch of InStyle magazine. So, and that's where I thought, you know what, I can really combine fashion with journalism.
Do you remember the day you got the Harper's gig? Because that's a seriously, you know, coveted role in the media business, particularly in the world of fashion. Do you remember landing that gig?
Yeah, I never thought, I actually didn't have that on my dream list. I just didn't think it would happen. There was two jobs in Australia at the time, the editor of Vogue and the editor of BAZAAR, and the editors at the time never moved on, right? So I kind of didn't even put it in my sights. And then there was a bit of movement with Edwina McCann going to Vogue, and then I was asked to apply. It wasn't easy. I was tapped on the shoulder and not given the job immediately. I had to go through a pretty rigorous interview process with Hearst in New York. So when I finally got it, it was relief, but it was also like, what do you do? What do you do when you get a job that you actually didn't have on your dream list, but it is the ultimate job? I was jumping out of my skin. Incredibly nervous as well, because you take on those big jobs and there was lots of chaos happening at the magazine at the time with staff moving and a very high profile job too, which I hadn't had before. So that was a steep learning curve that all eyes were on me, but it was a little bit of disbelief and then extreme excitement about the opportunity. And, you know, obviously there was the travel and just also creating a new team at BAZAAR. It was pretty incredible, really.
Well, it sounds like there was a little bit of self-doubt there, taking on a big role like that. Yeah. Did you lean on people in your life? Were there some people around you who were kind of kicking you along, going, you can do this? And how did you lean on those people?
Yeah, I had great mentors at the time. You know, Deborah Thomas, who was the former editor-in-chief of the Australian Women's Weekly. Helen McCabe is a great friend of mine. So I had great mentors around me. I also had publishers that believed in me, that had given me the job. So, you know, I was given the job for a reason, and it was a highly coveted job. So I think I had to have some faith in that. But it's really I've had some great female mentors in media that have really supported my career, and still today just send me messages of encouragement and you know, even it sounds very maternal, but, you know, I'm so proud of you, Kellie. You know, things that mean a lot from someone that has, I suppose, seen you grow up in the industry. But I would say female mentors have been incredible in my life, and I'm very lucky to have them still around and egging me on and supporting me. And yeah, it's important.
It is important. It's critical, actually. I wonder, you know, looking at a life in the world of fashion and fashion magazines, you know, there'd be a lot of people probably listening to this podcast fantasizing about a career in fashion, and how much does it look like the Devil Wears Prada, and are there Miranda Priestleys who get around in, you know, 17-inch stilettos and Hermes bags and the rest of it. What is it really like when you pull back the curtain working in the fashion industry?
It's part Devil Wears Prada, and I have stupidly been one of those stupid people walking on cobblestones in 20-inch heels and had to be carried.
Never again.
Never again. There's a very glamorous side to the job, and I won't deny that. I've been to some incredible fashion shows around the world. I went to the Chanel show in Cuba, which was,
Wow.
A world first. And, I've been to Paris 6, 7 times. I've been to Milan 8 times. I've been all over the world with fashion. So that's a very glamorous side of it. But at the end of the day, you're actually running a business. So with that comes a lot of responsibility budgets and P&Ls and making sure that you don't overspend so your CFO doesn't come chasing you and making you recoup it. So it's very stressful as well. You're not just spending money, you're having to make money to produce a magazine. And with that, especially in the media where there's been so much disruption, that budgets were shrinking, you still had to put out a beautiful product. So it was very challenging at times, and also having, shrinking teams because the largesse of the 80s and 90s were gone, where you had basically an editor to look at shoes. Back in the day in fashion magazines, you had a bag editor, a shoe editor, a jewellery editor. We had pretty much one staff, and a junior doing, everything that probably a team of 10 used to do. So yes, glamour, but also a lot of responsibility and stressful, and which ultimately, led to me leaving the media in the end.
So we'll go back to that in a moment, but I just want to touch on the Chanel show in Cuba. What happens at a Chanel show in Cuba? What happens when you arrive and you're ushered to your seat, and who are you sitting with, and what happens afterwards?
It was insane. So Cuba had only really just opened up to the West. I think the Rolling Stones had been there, a week before, and Barack Obama 2 months before. So it had only just really started opening up. But it is everything that you can possibly imagine out of a movie. So, you picked up at the airport, you're taken to a hotel where Frank Sinatra used to stay, and then the vintage cars that you see in movies or, in old historic photos, that's what we were driven around town in. As a guest of Chanel, I'm dressed in head to toe Chanel when I go to the show, and they had flown Giselle in for the show. Wow. So the show was on the streets of Cuba. It was a magnificent day. All the locals are hanging out their windows as all the front row guests, which, includes Anna Wintour and Glenda Bailey, who was at the time, editor of BAZAAR, and we're all sitting front row, and then Giselle's on the runway, and then you watch this incredible show and everyone's celebrating, and then we're whisked off to an after party, and, I found myself sitting on the stairs again with Giselle, just hanging out, chatting to her. and this is the crazy stuff that happens because you're in this foreign place. It's a very small group, and you end up rubbing shoulders with, A-list celebrities and some of the world's top models. And
so what do you chat to Giselle Bundchen about?
I think everyone loves Australians, which I think is a great icebreaker, right? So
they like our accent.
They love us, and I think because we're down to earth, right? And I think even though you do get incredibly intimidated, you probably don't show that. But yeah, we just chatted. Everyone wants to know how long it took. It's easy. The first icebreaker is always, how long did it take you to get here? It's like 2 days, 7 aircraft, whatever. But we just chatted about the show and about fashion, and I mean, she's fit, so we talked about yoga and the things that she loves to do. She's incredible. Like, you see her in pictures, she's even more incredible in real life. But she was very relaxed. Just wanted to talk about the show and how much she loved Carl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm like, I love Carl too.
Yeah. Everyone loves Carl.
Yeah.
So when you left Harper's, tell us what happened there, and how were you feeling at that point about maybe exiting the industry?
I was really, really nervous. It took me quite a while to leave, and I had a great mentor that was working at Westpac at the time, and he was quite senior at Westpac, and I worked with him on transitioning out of media because I thought it was really important, because I knew I wasn't going to go into another media job. So I worked quite closely with him at looking at my skill set to start with at first, and to be confident that the things that I knew and had learnt and developed in media were transferable skills. So I worked with him. I applied for a few jobs. Nothing seemed quite right, because I knew if I jumped out of the dream job, which came with all its perks, it had to be something that I was excited about and could really sink my teeth in. So it probably took me about 18 months to really to move. And then I ended up resigning to start a retail business. Probably a tougher transition than what I had thought. And there was a lot of shock too. I very much controlled the narrative around me leaving the media. I wanted it to be my narrative, that I wasn't, at the time media was challenged and they were merging magazines. So I wanted to own that narrative, what at the time seemed like a good idea, but probably wasn't, because I really annoyed senior management at Bauer Media at the time. They weren't happy about it, but it meant that I could leave and own that story, that it was my decision to leave. I wasn't sacked. It wasn't because of something else, that I was leaving to set up a retail business.
And why were you so determined to set that narrative?
I think because I'd had a great career in the media, and I'd seen what had happened to colleagues when they had taken redundancies or left, that it doesn't become clear as to why you left. And I didn't want anyone to think that it was because I had been sacked, because I'd had a great career in the media, and I wanted it to be very clear to people that had supported me and supported the magazine that was my choice.
Because there's so many eyeballs on public roles like that, right? So, you know, it's kind of open to being picked apart or misinterpreted or rewritten by a lot of people out there.
Yeah, and gossip, right? I knew, even if I went out to friends and colleagues and said, no, it's my decision, the gossip would have started, right? It's, oh no, she was sacked, it was because of this, or because of that. I've worked in the media a long time, right? So, and that's why I really wanted to control the messaging. And maybe it's a part of who I am too. It's I've worked in a very competitive industry for a long time, and I know that it is dog eat dog. So I didn't want to be eaten on my way out.
No, nor should you.
So it was.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
so it's self-preservation.
yeah.
And you're right. It can be a dog eat dog
Yeah.
kind of world and industry. So you have to protect yourself.
Yeah. And I think too, what I was going to do was really quite different. So I wanted support for that, and it to be seen as something I wasn't just doing because I had to. It was something that I'd really chosen to do and was backing myself to do.
So you went into this retail business. It was a accessories business, like mostly handbags.
Yes.
And what was some of the learnings for you in that experience, embarking on your own business?
I could write a book on it.
Yeah.
It was very challenging. I think I was, again, very naive. I think, I learnt very early that you sometimes going into business with someone isn't easy. I came out of that unemployed. I'd left a really great job. I thought I would be doing the business called The Way. I thought I'd be doing that for the next, 10 years at least. That was my path. And 18 months later, I was not in the business, and I was unemployed for the first time in my life.
And how did you navigate that period? Because a lot of people can approach those, and this is the thing too. Everyone goes through something like this at some stage, and I know exactly where you're coming from when you speak about these things, because when you are a public figure to whatever extent, you can become really protective of your own story and of your own narrative, because you are so vulnerable to it getting out of control and other people rewriting your own narrative. And so it becomes something that you cling to. And I understand that. So when you then head into this territory of not having a job for the first time in your life, how do you approach that period? What's sort of your focus in that time in your life?
Well, I had this amazing friend called Carla Zampatti.
Oh, I've heard of her.
Yeah. And Carla had heard that she was always a great mentor to me too. She loved catching up with me when I was editor of BAZAAR. She loved talking about women and, what do women love? What are you seeing your readers? So we used to have those little cups of coffee or, lunch at Bambini's. And she had heard along the grapevine that I was out of the business, and she called me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." She said, "Well, can you come and help me just a couple of days a week on a project?" And I said, "Okay, I've got nothing else to do." And that was a lifeline. It was pretty much all that I needed. And then from that, it was the 55th anniversary of Carla Zampatti, so I produced a magazine for her. So it was my wheelhouse. Worked on a couple of other projects with her. But she was a lifeline, right? And I think I was, and I was pretty depressed at the time. I knew I was pretty low. It had knocked the wind out of me, and I didn't know where to go from there. I knew I didn't want to go back into the media. But that was a beautiful lifeline, and I worked with her. I still work with the business. And unfortunately she passed away. But she was a very dear friend. But she was my lifeline, and got me back on my feet for sure.
We've also spoken to Allegra Spender on this podcast, and she had some beautiful memories to share about her mother.
Yeah.
And the work ethic that she instilled in her, and also her approach to money and growing up. And I mean, what an amazing Australian an amazing human being she was.
Yeah, and just loved women as well, because there's sometimes and we know, like from women in business, they become hardened and, and Carla was, and that's how I've explained her to a lot of friends. She's soft and hard, like there's this really tough, she had to be tough, an immigrant, came to Australia with nothing and built that business. So there's a toughness to her, but also that maternal side, which people don't see that often, which I was, privileged to see, but she was also tough. We used to fight quite a bit.
Yeah,
so.
But it says a lot about her that she could identify that you were going through something and reached out. And
oh, for sure. And it started off with just come over to my house for a cup of tea. It wasn't come into the office, me feeling, kind of exposed. It was come over and have a cup of tea and let's chat about what you want to do next. So yeah, she was incredible.
We all need a Carla's empathy in
our
life. Yeah. So where did the idea for the Volte come from?
Well, there was a business in the US, which is still around, called Rent the Runway. And my co-founder was a lawyer at the time and doing due diligence on Rent the Runway. And she saw that the business model was going to be challenged, right? So high overheads, you're buying stock, you're having to warehouse it, take care of it. So she looked at it further, and then we talked about, peer-to-peer. You look at businesses like eBay, that's peer-to-peer, the overheads are low because you're not holding any stock, and then you build a marketplace. It all sounds very easy. It's not. Build a marketplace around that peer-to-peer model. But that's where it came from. It really came from those early movers at Rent the Runway. We also saw that there was an appetite for women who are on social media and even rental stores back then, where women absolutely had an appetite to rent occasion wear. And that's what we really focused on, was occasion wear. We weren't going to rent out, jeans and jackets and things like that. We really saw that the gap in the market was for that occasion wear and luxury designer occasion wear. Yeah. But very much looked at that model of what is the most cost-effective way to build a marketplace without the overheads, and that was peer-to-peer.
So, okay, this is what sets your business apart. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore a little bit more of that in just a moment. Sick of paying megabucks for your internet? Switching could help you. So switch to Belong Internet. They're backed by Telstra, they have a reliable network, and with internet plans with prices that aren't too spicy. Plus, you can change plans once a month and you're not locked in. For zippy internet at nifty prices, search Belong Internet. It feels good to belong. So how have you been able to make the Volte more viable than other rental businesses? You speak about peer-to-peer. How exactly does it work?
So peer-to-peer is essentially, I own the dress and you rent the dress, and our business acts as the platform in between that connect the lender and the renter.
Right.
So I own the stock, so the Volte doesn't touch any of the stock. So it's a bit confusing because I'm saying I own the stock. So my name's Tracy. Tracy owns the stock, so I look after all of it. It's my wardrobe that I'm renting out, and then the Volte facilitates that. So we don't own anything.
And how do you collect revenue on that model?
We clip the rental price.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
So we take a percentage of the rental price. So that's our business model. So it's the easiest way is to explain it like eBay. So you go to eBay and you buy a bike for your kid, and eBay doesn't have the bike. It's, Steve down the road that's got the bike, and you either go and pick it up or Steve delivers it to you and you pay Steve, and then eBay are taking a percentage of that price.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And how far-reaching is the Volte now?
And we have 300,000 active monthly users.
Wow.
And we have 60,000 renters that are really, really active. So these are women that are renting a couple of times a year and sometimes a couple of times a month. But our USP, again, which makes our business so successful, is we have a cohort called our super lenders. So we have almost 300 super lenders who are women who are building businesses on the Volte. So they are earning between 50 and 200,000 a year from renting out their wardrobes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many items and what kind of items are they hiring out? Are they like seriously top, top shelf stuff?
Yeah, and you know the great thing about the Vault is our top 10 fashion brands are mainly Australian brands.
Wow.
So our biggest rental brands are Beckenbridge, Age, Alame, Sur the Label, Zimmerman, Camilla and Mark, Rebecca Valance. So you see all these beautiful brands that you and I love that are actually Australian women love as well. So our super lenders, they might have 50 pieces in their wardrobe. It just depends on the size of the business they're building on our platform. Or they might just have 10, but are rotating them quite often.
Wow.
But, at some dresses rent 50, 60 times on our platform. So, if you're spending, say, 800 to 1,000 and then you're renting it out for 200, the economics is quite good that you recoup the cost of that dress. And what we see with our super lenders, then they buy more stock.
So what have you figured out about this circular fashion economy that seems to be booming? Is it booming? What's the sort of behaviour pattern that's going on with that?
Well, we know we've just actually done a research paper with UTS, the University of Technology in Sydney, which we'll release. So there's a lot of data around resale. What we know about resale is that it's growing faster than traditional retail. So, so there is a real consumer shift globally. So most of the data is out of the US, but it is outgrowing traditional retail in terms of growth. So it's a billions of dollar industry. What we know is that customers come to us for different reasons. One is because they want to be involved in the circular economy and don't want to fill their wardrobes with more stuff. And then we have those young entrepreneurs that are trying monetising their wardrobe as well. But what we know about quality fashion, beautiful quality fashion, is that it can be worn 10 times, 20 times, 30 times. We've got one dress, a Zimmerman dress, that's been worn 70 times and is still in beautiful condition. So if you invest in quality fashion and put it into the circular economy, not only does it, it's shared and worn, but you can also earn an income out of it. So that is the model, really.
So investing in fashion is a topic I really want to dig down on because, I'm not going to lie, it's a line I've used. It's an investment piece. It's a forever piece. Cost per wear, it's a good investment. It's not a waste of money. We've all kind of, justified some purchases like that. But what is the truth behind that? Are there items that are good investment pieces?
Yeah. Good quality fashion has a resale value. I think you can look at the Chanel and Hermes business model. That is an anomaly, right? That a Chanel 2.55, I have one, so I know, 10 years ago, cost about probably, someone will fact check me on this, probably about $12,000 or $13,000. They're probably about 16 or 17,000.
Is that like the flat bag?
With the little shit. Yeah, right. So that's an investment piece. A Birkin we know has outperformed the share market, right? I wish I'd bought one 20 years ago when I was looking at them, but they were 10,000 then, and I thought that is ridiculous.
It's crazy,
but it's probably worth 50,000 now.
Yeah.
That's probably not the truth for everything. But really good quality fashion, you may not recoup the retail price, but it absolutely has value on the rental and resale market. And in terms of rental, the difference is that you can rent it over and over again. With resale, it's a one-off, sale. But with rental, you can continue to make money out of that purchase. So you might choose to wear it 3 or 4 times, and then you list it on the Vault, and then you can rent it out another 10 or 20 times.
Wow.
And you recoup the value of that dress.
Wow. So, I see online, I see in the news that luxury fashion is booming right now. Some of the big fashion houses overseas are still making a lot of money, but meantime, some of the sort of lower end high street kind of stores are closing at a rapid rate. So how do you explain that? What's going on? Why is there such a boom going on at the top end in a cost of living crisis when people are really feeling the pinch?
There's a couple of things at play. One, that luxury customer, a lot of them are untouchable in terms of personal wealth, right? So yes, their share portfolio may have fluctuated slightly, but
the cost of living crisis
isn't affecting them. So they still have high disposable income, and we saw that with COVID in Australia. That we used to have a lot of Chinese, tourism in Australia, which really kind of drove that luxury business in Australia. But when the borders closed, we then saw there was a local consumer that became, that top customer because they had money to burn because they weren't travelling travelling or buying cars or what have you. So that money, then went into luxury items. So it is a different consumer. What is happening at the other end is twofold. It's cost of living. But we are also a global fashion economy now, and we've seen businesses like Shein and Temu absolutely destroy fashion economies globally. And that, again, is twofold. One, the consumer is buying cheap product because they see it as cheap and they can justify it because, times are a little bit harder. But also digital marketing, which is what drives a lot of purchases today, is being bought out by these big companies who are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of buying Facebook ads and Instagram ads, and that's why we're being fed the same stuff. So there's quite a few things at play which are really damaging local Australian fashion businesses. But, the cost of living crisis is absolutely, discretionary spend is down.
So you've recently partnered with David Jones here in Australia on your platform on the Volte. How does that work, and what does that say, do you think, about the future for fashion in Australia? What are the trends going to be in the future?
I mean, David Jones are an early mover. They're fantastic. They understand the sustainability piece, and to be a large retailer, you have to look at the end of life and the circular economy of your business. It can't just be now, we sell you an item, see you later. So smart on their behalf, great for us. But what that partnership means is that when you shop on David Jones, we have what we call a widget or an API or a button. So when you go to buy, say, a Rebecca Valance dress or an Age dress, there is a button on that says save it to the Volte to rent later. So you purchase that dress, you tick the box, that dress is delivered to you by David Jones, and we have created an account for you on the Volte, and when you're ready, you just click a button and all of that product information is now available for you to list that onto the Volte to rent straight away. But it's up to you when you publish it. But the trends we're seeing is the reason why the circular economy is not going to go away. Again, there are lots of things at play, but the biggest is global legislation. This is probably the boring part of fashion, but governments, especially in the US, in Europe, the UK, and now in Australia, are saying to fashion producers, you are producing too much, right? And we now want to know what you're doing to reduce the production and what you are doing with your product at the end of life. So you can no longer just bring all this product into the country, sell it, destroy it. We don't care anymore. They're now going to be required to report on circular economies. And for us, we are a circular economy business. So say with David Jones, we'll be able to tell them the dresses that are listed on the Volte, what exactly has happened to those dresses. So we can tell them who they were rented by, where in Australia they went. Because we have a partnership with eBay, we can then tell them whether it was resold. So that information is really important now to fashion businesses globally. So that is a massive shift that will impact fashion globally.
I mean, I'm so happy to see that you've landed in this space where you're obviously thriving, as you deserve to do, but also with so much potential to grow even more as well. What's your hope for the Volte? Where do you see it headed?
Global.
Yeah, global domination or nothing.
I'm serious. We're launching in the UK. So the Volte platform is ready to go. We have already 1,000, we have 200 super lenders and 1,000 items all ready to go on the Volte UK. So we'll go live with that in the next couple of weeks. We're working with eBay UK and eBay US to integrate with them. We have the technology side. This is why I love talking to you. We have the fashion platform, which is our marketplace, but we have a fashion technology business as well, and that's where our global growth will be, and that is where we've had global interest from. So eBay Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of eBay, invested in the Volte a couple of years ago. So they are one of our largest investors. So we work quite closely with them, and our technology play has global application.
How have you got your head around all the tech? Like that's a different world to magazines, right? So you've just chucked yourself in the deep end with
Literally.
this, right?
Yeah, and I think probably because I'm older, I used to get criticised all the time when I was a young journalist that I didn't ask enough questions. I think now I'm older and more confident. I don't care if I ask a dumb question.
Yeah.
And we have a brilliant CTO that loves me for my knowledge, so will allow me to ask the dumb questions and he answers them. politely and and that's the thing, right? I didn't know much about technology, right? I grew up in the era where there was no Instagram, right? You know,
Lucky you.
lucky me, right? And I remember that
Yeah.
conversation. I was at the Sydney Morning Herald at the time. Oh, it's a flash in the pan; it will go away. It's still here, but you know. I love it, right? I'm learning so much, and there's still an application of what I know, you know, especially in the fashion space, and also having worked at Harper's BAZAAR, I have a global fashion network, and it's back to my mentor at Westpac. It's like having that confidence to look at what I've learnt and grown over the year, which is I'm very proud of my network. You know, that it is an international network. So now I can, you know, go to London and there's still people I know from the fashion industry that are still very powerful within that I can connect with, that connects my business to the UK market and to the US market. So yes, learning a lot of stuff about technology, but I love it. Really, really enjoying it.
I think this is so encouraging for a lot of people who think about a career change or a pivot, as we all say these days, because you often fear that your skills won't transfer or you don't have exactly the skill set that's required. But oftentimes you just have to really focus on the skills that you have developed and how meaningful they would be in another environment.
Yeah, and I think it's that confidence thing, right? And when we don't always have it, and I absolutely, I absolutely agree. And it's not thinking that you need to go and do an MBA or this to go and get a new job, because I actually did have skill set that was transferable, right? You know, being curious is a great thing in a room, and that's what I kept being told. Like, you know, someone that can get into a room and ask lots of questions, that is, and with confidence,
Being able to communicate,
right?
really.
You know, massive skill sets, you know, and you underestimate that because we're surrounded by really good communicators. So you just think it's a dime a dozen.
Oh, and I bet you've handled some pretty prickly characters over the years too.
I have, and sometimes people find me prickly now.
Sometimes you got to be a little prickly, right?
But yeah, it's having a look at what you can do rather than what you can't do. And I can say that now because I've been through all iterations of I can't do that. But I think I just hone in on what you're really good at, you know. Yes, I ran a P&L, but seriously, do you want me to run your P&L? I would probably say no.
Yes, no thanks.
I know, you know, I sit on the board of MJ Bale and it's an awesome group of people and they know I'm not the P&L person, you know, and that's great because that's not my, yes, I can read one, but that's not my passion. It's not my skill set, but
you know
I'm there
your
for
lane.
another.
You know your lane.
Yeah.
So if we look a bit more big picture in terms of you, Kellie, and maybe how you grew up and your relationship to money. When you look at your career, you know, there's great ambition there and drive and resilience as well. Who or what sort of set your business and your money mindset when you were growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in Canberra, so beautiful middle class family, but my parents built a new house in the 80s, so we had 18% interest rates. And it was tough, and I will always remember that. You know, we had this great house, but Mum and Dad couldn't afford carpet, so we had seagrass matting for years in our house. And my brother it's funny because he's a banker now, right? But he was a BMX star and he used to travel a bit. So Mum and I would quite often stay home and we would have no money for the weekend. It may have been $20. And I recall that really clearly because she would try to make the weekend really lovely for me, but we couldn't do anything because my brother was away racing and that's where the money was going. Listen, I've got no resentment towards my brother, but I do remember there not being a lot of money around. And also being really aware that my parents had worked. They both didn't go to university, right? Hardworking, but didn't have a university education. I knew that there weren't going to be handouts because that's not the kind of family. So I knew that everything in life I would have to work for.
You'd have to create it.
I'd have to create it. There wouldn't be a cheque written when I was 21 or 30 to buy a house. That was not going to happen. So I was very clear from the get-go that anything I achieved would be done on my own. But you cannot underestimate the power of having a really loving, supportive family, right? So that is invaluable.
For sure.
I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Well, that's a richness in itself.
Yeah.
That's a wealth in itself.
Yeah, exactly. Having parents that have always thought I was amazing and backed me and encouraged me. I never felt like, never felt like I was a girl. It was just, I was just going to go off into the world and succeed. It was like, oh, you should do this or you should do that because you're a girl. It was never, that wasn't even questioned. It was, my mum, in actual fact, still says to me, you do too much, right? When I got, the CEO of Australian Fashion Week at the moment, and I actually didn't call my mum. I only called my mum when I knew it was going to be released in the media because I thought she would worry. And she immediately did worry. Yeah. And then she called me back the next day and said, I'm so proud of you. But my mother's instinct is to worry because you do so much. And I said, I wouldn't do it unless I really wanted to, Mum. So, but yeah. Yeah, always very conscious of money. But I bought my first house when I was 27. So I was always very good at saving. My first job in Sydney was at Practical Parenting magazine. I wasn't paid very much money. I lived on, it's hideous, but white roll and banana sandwiches for I think 12 months, which I knew would cost me $1.20. Yeah. Like it was all those things. I was frugal. Yeah. So, yeah.
Financial independence is clearly something that's always been really important to you.
I've always been financially independent, and it's funny because Carla Zampatti used to say that to me all the time, and I'd be like, Carla, I've got that under control. I've always had my, I'm married. I've been married for 20 years. I have, mortgages, but I've always had my own money. I've managed my own salary. I've negotiated all my own salary. My husband and I work together and we contribute to a mortgage together and family costs, but I have my own money. And I've found that really, really important. I think we had a shared credit card for about 1 minute because I was in Milan at the time. I went to, it was the first time we'd ever had a joint credit card. And I'd arrive in Milan, I'd go straight to Prada because at the time you'd get 30% off media. So I'd go straight to Prada, and I'm a size 38. So the shoes used to sell out really quickly. Yeah. So I'd go straight to Prada, I'd buy my 1 or 2 pairs of shoes, and then I'd go to Corso Como and buy myself something. And he rang me and he said, oh my God, I think your credit card's been stolen. I said, what do you mean? He said,
shoes at Prada.
He's like, there's X amount of dollars on the credit card straight away. They've used it at Prada and this place called Corso Como. And I hung up on him. And then I texted and said, we'll never have a joint credit card ever again.
No, we're done. This arrangement is over. The marriage is good, but the credit card's
You
done.
don't know what to know. Need to know.
Well, now you can put those Prada shoes up on the Volte and get money out of them.
I've still got those Prada shoes.
Of course you do. See, it's an investment.
And an Alexander McQueen dress that I bought.
So aside from, investing in Prada shoes, what have you taught your daughters? You have 2 daughters, 19 and 16?
Yes.
What have you taught them about money and managing money?
It's funny to watch them, actually. My youngest daughter, I actually won't let her have a job. Some parents might not agree with that, but she plays a lot of sport, and I would like her to focus on school and sport. We say school, sport, social. So she earns pocket money around the house by helping me out, but she has to be frugal, right? Because she gets an allowance and that's it. But it's our family decision that she can't have a job yet, and that's because she can't. I'd rather that she's playing her sport and focusing on school. But my eldest daughter, who's now at university, she taught swimming when she was at school and squirreled all that away. She was very good at putting her hand out but not spending her own money, so maybe learnt that from me, that, I'm not spending a dime, and if she did spend a dime, it was like, well, I've spent it on this, can you please refund it? But now she's at university, she has a job, and it's been quite interesting to watch because she's tight, she watches every dollar. So some people might say that's a bit tough, but I think it's also learning the value of money, and that, you've worked hard. She works in retail in Canberra, and it all goes into the bank, and I see her spend it really sparingly, and I think that's probably a good thing to learn, right? You don't empty your bank account. She has an amount that she likes to have in there, and she doesn't like to go below it. So if she does spend a bit of money on something, it's then quickly she saves again to get it back to that. Yeah, her buffer. Yeah.
So look, if you're looking back over the course of your career in its fullness at this stage, because there's still obviously a lot to run with the Volte, what would be maybe one of the most important lessons that you could share with anyone listening to this podcast today?
Don't be afraid of making a mistake. Yeah. I think perfection is...
That's so interesting that's the lesson. Yeah. I mean, given how tightly you've held onto your narrative. Yeah. And again, that speaks to me being in television. There have been times in my career where I've tried to really control the narrative. But it's because everyone else seems to be allowed to fail, but we feel like we can't.
Yeah.
Right. When you're public.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to fail, and you have to be able to accept it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, you learn something from failing. But the interesting thing is I got a board role because the person that employed me to be on their board was because I'd had failure in business, right? So he valued the fact that I had had a failure, I had rebuilt my career and gone on, which looked like seamlessly, but it doesn't, scratch under the surface it was. But he thought that was a really, really, really valuable skill set and trait to have, the fact that I had overcome failure. And I was on an investor meeting for the Volte the other day, because we've got some really amazing investors internationally that want to invest in the Volte, and she wanted to know about my career path. Because you see my CV, it all looks very shiny and glossy. And when I talked to her about the retail business and that it failed, she said to me, I like you more that you've had a failure now than I did before. So I think it's really interesting, right? Because I think if life's perfect, then you won't take risks, you won't pick yourself up, and you probably, crumble under the pressure of a failure, right? Because you don't know what to do. I'm much calmer now, especially with Fashion Week, right? There's lots of things happening. I'm very calm about it. It's out of my control. I can control so much, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we'll put on an amazing event, but I cannot control every facet of it. And I think that comes with failure, right? That you can't control everything. And I think when you're starting out, especially in our industry where it's all picture perfect, I'm a big fashion editor and I look the part, I play the part, but I've failed, and that's okay to do that.
Well, because we all do.
We all do.
Over and over and over.
Yeah.
And every now and then we might get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Kellie, it's so nice to catch up and to chat, and it's lovely to see you and see how the Volte is thriving as well. Thanks for giving us some time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No worries.